Hi everyone, welcome and thanks for joining us for today's webinar. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Maturo. I'm a project manager at Elan working on our Quebec Relations project. And I would like to begin by recognizing that Elan, and indeed the office space that I'm speaking to you from, is located in Tiohtià:ke, which is the original name for Montreal in Kanien'kehá:ka, the language of the Mohawk, also known as Muniang, which is the Anishinaabe name given to the city by the Algonquin. Even though we're speaking to each other remotely and not in the same physical space, I do want to start by acknowledging that fact before we go any further, as well as give you an opportunity to reflect on that where you are as well. So with this in mind, I'd like to welcome you all to our 5th Quebec Relations webinar for 2021. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, Quebec Relations, or QR for short, as you can see in our snazzy new logo in the corner of your screen, QR is an Elan project that's first and foremost about helping artists and arts organizations access funding and other key resources offered by the provincial government. Today, we're going to be looking at one of the most significant and I think useful resources that we've been able to develop over the past few years, namely our searchable provincial funding platform. So this is a resource that we launched at the beginning of March of 2020. And as you're no doubt aware, within a few weeks of that launch, all our worlds changed quite dramatically with the pandemic. So it's understandable that it was maybe hard for people to really want to engage with the platform at that time, or indeed even be aware of its existence. But we have been busy in the interim, and in particular, we've added some really useful new content over the past couple of months. So we thought, what better time to reintroduce people to the platform, show you how it works, and how it can help you identify the funding programs that meet your needs. So today we're going to look at the platform in some detail. I'll actually walk you through how it works, take a look at the website itself, and also tell you about some of our complementary services that you can use alongside the platform to make the process of identifying and applying for grants simpler, as well as less stressful. So we do have quite a lot to cover today, but I just want to give you a quick outline of what we're going to talk about before we get into it. So first, I'll provide a bit of background about the project, not just where we're at now, but also how the project has evolved and how that has informed the development of the platform along the way. Then we'll move from the telling part of the webinar into the showing. So I'll share my screen and walk you through the interface to give you a sense of how it works and how it can help you. That will also include a look at some specific programs on the platform that you may want to be aware of, depending on your applicant profile. And with that in mind, I'll then tell you a bit about our complementary resources, namely our free consultation and grant assistance services that can help guide you from the research phase to actually submitting an application. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll close off with a question and answer period. Because we are expecting quite a lot of people today, to make things easier, we'll sort of ask you if you have any questions. Just type those in the chat box throughout the webinar, and then I'll address those at the end of the session. Depending on how much time we have at the end, we may also invite people to unmute and ask their questions if there are still any sort of lingering questions to address. I also do want to note that I'll be sharing my presentation slides via email later today. And we'll try to have a recording of the presentation up on the Elan YouTube profile sometime next week. So really don't feel like you have to retain every bit of information in the presentation. You can always review later and then submit questions to me via email if need be. In terms of other sort of minor notes, I have been sick the past few days, starting to feel better, but please forgive me if my voice becomes a little bit raspier as this goes on. And also sort of based on past webinars, I have a feeling one or more of my cats will make an appearance at some point. So do bear with me if that is the case. But with that said, we'll move on to the big question. What is Quebec Relations, for those of you who are not already aware? Well, Quebec Relations is an Elan project that first launched in 2018. We received the entirety of our support from the Secretariat for Relations with English-speaking Quebecers within the provincial government. And the genesis of this project really comes from trying to address lingering questions of whether there continue to be problems for Quebec's English-speaking artists in accessing services and funding programs in the province. And the answer to that question is complicated, but there are factors that can contribute to difficulties for the English-speaking community. So sometimes it's simply a matter of information not circulating as effectively as it could. Often it's because important documentation isn't available in English, which can be a big barrier to some, though not all, in the community. And sometimes there are systemic barriers, even if they're just sort of perceived, that do keep people from wanting to apply. So in practice, many English-speaking artists in Quebec feel more comfortable applying to either, say, Canada Council for the Arts, or even municipal funders like the Conseil des Arts de Montréal, compared to the equivalent provincial funders like Conseil des Arts et Lettres du Québec or CALQ. So in effect, by not even bothering, people are really denying themselves the opportunity to access sources of funding that are very much available to them, despite the potential learning curve that may or may not exist in accessing them. Of course, there's also the question of all of the other funding sources that are available through other provincial ministries that might come in handy to people in the English language arts community, even if those programs don't have necessarily a specific arts focus. So for most people, those are totally uncharted territory and really quite intimidating to start trying to get to grips with. So with this in mind, really the overarching purpose of the project from the beginning has been to improve the flow of information between the funding bodies and ministries of the government of Quebec and the English language community, but also really to do that in a way that is sort of a two-way flow of information. So of course, first and foremost, that means making sure that the community is aware of the government services and funding programs being made available and how they can go about applying for those, but also engaging with the community through things like surveys, focus groups, and other consultations to find out about their experiences and identify any pressing needs or issues within the community. And as you'll hear shortly, that community feedback has actually been quite pivotal in the development of things like the platform leading into its current format that we use today. So over the past 3 years, we've really grown from more of a research-oriented project to a project where we try to offer resources and services that help make it easier for artists and arts organizations to find the funding that's relevant to their needs, to then figure out what they need to do to actually apply, and finally to learn the key skills that will help them apply with greater confidence now and in the future. And I'm very happy to add that the Secretariat has been extremely supportive of our work and has in fact renewed our funding for an additional 2 years beyond our original 3-year mandate. So we're very excited to continue offering and developing our resources until at least March of 2023. So having discussed a bit about the background of the project in general, I'll take a moment to talk about the development of the platform itself. So one of the earliest research goals of Quebec Relations was really to be able to document the complete range of funding sources at the provincial level. So really not just the usual suspects that people in the arts are already more or less aware of. So CALQ, SODEC, and the Ministry of Culture being the sort of 3 primary ones. We really had the sense that there were other funding opportunities out there from other provincial ministries that could be benefiting the community if people knew they were out there. So we combed through each funding agency and provincial ministry's website and started off with an initial list of a little over 100 programs that we had identified. And at the beginning, we limited our search to programs available to not-for-profit organizations, as well as for-profit businesses, since those were really the ones where documentation would only be available in French. Our thinking was, even if you're really fluently bilingual, if you work for an English language arts organization and you're super busy, you're trying to quickly figure out if a grant is right for you, it's just going to be a whole lot easier to be able to scan through that documentation in English. So with this in mind, the next step for us was to go through each of these programs that we had identified, pull the most relevant information and eligibility criteria, so we could then translate and effectively present that information in a really succinct 1-page or 1.5-page format for each program. And that process really took about the whole latter half of 2019 until we had finally finished sort of a package of documents that we could start sharing with people. And we found out 2 really important things during our focus group sessions around that time when we actually started sharing those documents with people for the first time. So first of all, we realized that giving people a document with about 120 pages of text was not necessarily the most effective way of sharing the information with them. Not a huge surprise in hindsight. But second of all, we also found that this documentation could be really helpful as a research tool, but that its value would also really depend on the level of experience and the level of comfort of whoever was using it. And that some people would maybe need a little bit of extra support, which resulted in some of the the complementary resources that I'll tell you about a little bit later on. But when it comes to the format and presenting those documents in a more efficient and sort of accessible way, that really was the birth of the funding platform as it exists today. It really became obvious to us around that time that presenting all of this documentation on the web for people to access freely and at their leisure was the best way of going about it. So between December of 2019 and March of 2020, we really moved quite quickly to identify the features of what we wanted to include on the platform and work with a developer to help us design the platform and get all of that program documentation into a functional database on the back end to then populate the site. So we wanted to make sure that the layout was fairly clear and readable, obviously, but also that it was searchable so that you didn't have to scroll through an endless list of programs, and also that every page contained all of the necessary links and contact information so you could very easily read more on the funder's website or contact a program officer with your questions. And I do think this point about links to the funder's website is a good one to emphasize here. We do really try our best to ensure that the information on the platform is as accurate and up-to-date as possible, particularly because for a lot of these programs, this is the only place online where this documentation is available in English. But at the end of the day, we like to consider the platform as first and foremost a research tool. It's great for collecting a ton of different programs all in one place, so you can quickly identify what's useful to you, get a clear sense of what those programs offer and what you need to do to apply. But because we are synthesizing and translating that information, we always do encourage people to consult the documentation in full on the funder's website before submitting an application, just to make sure that you have all of the necessary information in full detail. Because as I say, we try to summarize things just to give you the basic information. The trade-off is that we don't go into exhaustive detail. And of course, if by any chance the documentation on the funder's website isn't clear for you, we're absolutely happy to step in and help you work through any questions that you may have. So that brings us to today and some really positive and exciting developments in the platform. As I mentioned a few moments ago, initially the platform was directed towards organizations because it was so important to be able to provide that translated documentation. But the value of the platform is not just in the translations, but as I've said previously, its value as a comprehensive research tool. So it's about having all of these programs in one place so you can search at your convenience and not have to be going back and forth between a dozen different websites. So with that in mind, we've been hard at work over the past few months to not only keep the platform updated with any changes to existing programs, as well as any newly announced grants for organizations, but also to expand the platform to make it useful for individual artists and writers as well as organizations. And when I say that we have been busy, I mostly mean our research coordinator, Francisco Gonzalez Rosas, who joined the team in August and then who has put a ton of work into the platform over the past few months. So thank you again, Francisco, for all your hard work. So as a result, we've added all of CALQ's individual grant programs, and we are currently in the process of adding their many residency programs, which we should have completed by the end of the year. And that has helped to bring our total from an already fairly impressive 120 or so programs in spring of 2020 to now well over 200 programs as of today. And that is a number that will continue to climb as new programs are announced. And we do try to get those new programs on the platform as quickly as possible, of course, depending on whether or not translation is required, which can take a bit more time, understandably. So the programs on the platform encompass funders such as CALQ, SODEC, Ministère de la Culture, so the big three sort of arts and culture funders, but also the Ministère de l'Éducation, Ministère des Affaires municipales, Ministère du Tourisme, the SAQ, Société de l'Habitation du Québec, Secrétariat à la Capitale Nationale, as well as Emploi Québec. And it is, of course, worth clarifying here that because we do receive our funding from the Secretariat to focus on programs available in Quebec, we haven't included comparable programs at the federal or municipal level. So for example, those offered by Canada Council or the Conseil des Arts de Montréal. But I am happy to address any questions about those through email if ever you do want to know more about those specific funders. So with all of this background context out of the way, I think the best thing to do right now is to show rather than tell. So I'm going to take some time now to just exit my slideshow with my screen shared and hop over to the platform itself. Sort of show you what it looks like, guide you through its functionality, and we can go from there. And for any of you who have used the platform before, even just earlier this week, you may notice that it has a nice cosmetic overhaul as of this morning. So we're really happy with these new design elements that have just been implemented, including our lovely new QR logo, which Francisco designed for us. So I'll take you some time now to just walk through all of the features on the site. As you see when you first get to the page, the main bit of information is in this search box right here. So this allows you to basically add your criteria to match your applicant profile and then search for the programs that then match those criteria. You have sort of the primary three search fields here, but if you want to refine your results further, you can click on this More Options button over here, which will then bring up this second row of options to help sort of dial in a little bit more detail. But of course, if you prefer not to search, you can also just scroll through the entirety of all the programs which are listed below. And each of them has one of these sort of handy preview box that you can see with sort of the most basic information at a glance to help you decide if you want to know more, in which case you can click the link to view that page in full. And if you do sort of decide to scroll through and find yourself sort of adrift midway down this very long page, you can click this sort of upwards pointing arrow in the bottom right corner of your screen, which will conveniently return you to the top of the page. So we'll take a moment now to just sort of look through these search functions in a little bit more detail. And as I mentioned, I think the first row is the most important. So to begin, you have the different artistic disciplines under the field category that you can choose from. And these are mostly populated by the categories on the CALQ and SODEC websites. And because of that, you can see a bit of differentiation when it comes to things like film and television production and film and video art. So in this particular example, the first category is based on a SODEC category that is more for sort of industry-oriented programs, production-oriented, whereas the film and video art category is more directed to arts funding that is available through CALQ. So that's one distinction to be aware of there. Otherwise, we try to keep things fairly general to avoid having to mess around with different categories. And of course, as with all of these other fields, if you sort of click through these, have a look and decide you would rather just not use that field and sort of keep it open-ended, you can just select the basic category at the top, which in this case is field, and that will just sort of leave it blank and not affect your search results. Next, you have the available to section, which includes a variety of sort of more niche applicant profiles. But I would say in the overwhelming majority of cases, you're going to be looking at three main categories. We have, of course, for-profit companies. So for example, film and television production companies, record labels, basically sort of businesses in the cultural industries operating on a for-profit model. We also have not-for-profit organizations, so arts and culture organizations that may be involved in the creation, production, or presentation of works that operate on a not-for-profit model. And of course, individual artists, which encompasses both artists and writers. Finally, in this row, we have the regions category, which unsurprisingly contains all of the regions from across the province of Quebec. I will say that for the most part, the overwhelming majority of the programs on the platform are available to all regions. So not necessarily a thing where you necessarily have to zero in on your particular region, but there are some programs that are directed sort of regionally specific that can be useful. And you may also notice this sort of mysterious category called remote regions towards the bottom. This is for a very particular SODEC program. So if you're curious, you can select that, and that program documentation will show you in more detail sort of how they define what exactly is a remote region. In the second row, of course, we have funder. So that's the particular funding body that you would be looking for grant programs from to help you sort of filter your results. I will sort of note here that depending on your applicant category, this may already sort of effectively filter your search results down to more or less one or two funders. So for example, if you select programs for individual artists, you are mostly going to get programs from CALQ, although not entirely. So I would say this section is particularly useful for not-for-profit organizations if you'd like to get a little bit more specific in your search results. The financial aid and duration categories sort of give you a few different ranges of financial aid amounts or lengths of available funding programs to help you refine your results. I would say that these are probably two of the categories to maybe leave in sort of the general category at first, and only really sort of get into if you really need to help refine a longer list of search results. And then lastly, we have the type of aid category, which of course gives you the different types of programs available. For the most part, most of these programs are grant programs. There are also some loan programs. We have an other category, which encompasses things like tax credits, sort of other miscellaneous categories that we've lumped into this other. And then, of course, the newly added residency category, which gives you all of CALQ's residency programs as they are added. And then when you have selected your categories, you can either search to see the results based on what you've entered, or if you're not satisfied with what you've entered in there, you'd like to start over, you can just hit this reset button and it will return everything to the basic default fields that you get when you first load the page. So we might as well sort of look at an example of this just to see how it works. So for instance, let's say that we are interested in programs available to the visual arts that are available to individual artists. And let's say, for example, we're interested as an artist located in Montreal. So we've selected these three main categories. And now if we're satisfied with those, we'll simply click search. And you can see right at the top, it will tell you in big, bold letters how many search results have actually resulted from these particular categories. The other thing to note is that for each unique search result, it yields a particular URL or web address sort of at the top of your screen. And those are sort of a static address for your particular search results. So if you always want to keep tabs on what visual arts programs are available to individual artists in Montreal, you can simply copy that address or bookmark it, and then just return to it whenever you want. And you're automatically going to be looking at those programs that match those criteria. So if we take the time to sort of scroll down and look at what we've got, we can see sort of a unique program available through the Ministère des Affaires Municipales et Habitation right off the bat. So that's sort of a unique non-arts program. But otherwise, as we scroll further down, we can see the individual artist programs that have been added from CALQ. So we'll scroll down, have a look at those. Maybe we want to refer back to the results at the top. For example, let's have a look at this acquisition and marketing program. So let's say we like the looks of the sort of basic information that's presented here. We want to click the link and look at the actual page to see this in more detail. So this is basically the model of what these pages look like across all of these programs, more or less. Right at the top, you can see of course, the title of the program, but underneath you also have the French language title for the program. which can be really helpful if you're sort of referring back and forth to the documentation on the funder's website. Just below that, you have kind of the quick hits of the most important information to know at a glance about any particular program. So you can see that this is available through CALQ. You can see that this is project funding rather than operating funding or other sort of miscellaneous program types. You can see that in this case, as with most CALQ programs, it operates according to a rolling deadline. It's also clear that this is a grant program rather than a loan, a residency, or what have you along those lines. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, how much money is it? You can see that this program is up to $10,000 and it covers up to 50% of your eligible expenses. So with that in mind, if we sort of start to take a look further down the page, we can see just below that is the description section. And this, we basically try to include just a sort of basic text about what the program is, what its goal is, and who it's directed towards. We try to keep that fairly brief to not go into too much detail, to just give you the basic information. You can see in this case, as with all of the CALQ programs on the platform, we do include a link to their most up-to-date guidelines for their sort of COVID-19 specific regulations, because those affect different programs differently. They are constantly evolving, so it could be good to just sort of refer to those to get a clear idea of if there are any current limitations on the program that you're looking at. If we scroll down a little bit further, we have the Open To section to let us know what type of applicants can actually apply to this program. In this case, you can see this one's for individual artists. And just below that, we have the criteria section. So this really is just all of the basic eligibility criteria and general guidelines that you need to know for this specific program. So information about, what kind of applicant you need to be to apply, any parameters about residency or particular submission guidelines that are specific to that funder, things along those lines. Whenever possible, we also try to give information about what kind of projects are eligible or not eligible, just to sort of give you added clarity about that, because sometimes those concrete examples can be quite helpful. Just below that, we have the eligible expenses category. So whenever those are explicitly listed, we try to give you some details about what kind of costs involved in your project you can actually include in your budget and have those be sort of eligible to be covered through your grant. And then lastly, just at the bottom, we have the supporting documents section. So this is basically everything other than the main application form that you do need to think about to be able to submit your application. Whenever possible, we try to include links to the actual form or template on the funder's website. So we do try to keep this section fairly brief, but because some of these documents can be more complicated than others, I do suggest that it can be helpful to look at the funder's website for a little more detail where necessary about this additional documentation. So if we just return to the top of this page to take a look at the right side of the page, we have the basic contact information right here. So you can see we've included the phone number and email address for the particular program officer for this program. Whenever possible, we try to include the contact information for a specific person rather than just a general mailbox. Often you will also find that there are multiple points of contact for a given program, depending on whether there are multiple program officers handling different artistic disciplines or sort of different regional responsibilities. And just below that, you have the link to view the full documentation on the funder's website. So here you can see we link back to the CALQ page for this program. As we do try to keep these links as up to date as possible, try to fix any broken links, but it can happen that funders are changing things around on their websites. It can take us a second to get around to it. So if ever you do sort of stumble across something that's not working, please do let us know. We'll be happy to get that fixed ASAP. But I think as of our sort of recent review from a month ago, everything should be mostly up to date. Just below that, you have sort of the final two boxes to look at. You have the field section. So that tells you what artistic disciplines are eligible for that particular program. In this one, it's just visual arts. For many of these programs, it will be sort of the full spectrum of different artistic disciplines. And then below that, of course, you have the list of eligible regions. So for this one, as you can see, it's basically all of the regions of the province that are eligible. And I will note for these two sections, each entry here is a link. So if, for example, you wanted to see all of the programs that are available to the visual arts in general, you can simply click that and go to back to the main search result page and see that there are 108 programs directed specifically to the visual arts. But I will just return to the page here and sort of have a final look at that. Yes, there's one last sort of little cherry on top that I want to note. In the top right corner here, we have this little print icon. For those of you who maybe like to sort of review on the website, then keep a hard copy of any programs that you've identified just for your records, you can click this printer icon, which will sort of open up this little window asking you if you'd like to open a new tab to print. I will click OK. I will then quickly close out of this because I don't actually want to print it, but it should give you the option to print to your printer right away. But if you sort of look at what it's showing you, it basically just generates a plain text version of all of the information that you see on the previous page, just so it's easier for your printer to handle. You're not messing with the sort of particular formatting of the web page. So again, just sort of an added kind of added feature for anyone who does like to keep a hard copy. It may be for some people that you try to open that and the tab doesn't open, in which case you should just try to close your, pardon me, you should just try to enable the pop-up blocker feature on your browser. Just make sure that it's willing to accept a pop-up on that website. So I do want to add here that the development of the platform is ongoing as you sort of take a look at this template. We are always looking to refine and improve the user experience for people. So as you hopefully start making use of the platform, I really do encourage you to share your user feedback with us so we can address any quirks that you may experience in using this, or change any features that just aren't working according to their intended purpose. So I'll invite Francisco to share his email in the chat now, so you can send him an email later on with any feedback. I've also included his email address in the slides, so you can grab it from there as well when I send those out. So yeah, as you see here, this page, this is basically the same template that all of the programs on here follow. The main difference will really just be the amount of text that is included on one page or another. My cat is maybe about to make an appearance. So the main difference will really be the amount of text. And that's really a question of sort of what we determine to be the minimum amount of information that we deemed it necessary to include to be able to give you a clear picture about the program and whether or not you should apply. So now that you've got a sense of the general features and functionality of the platform, I'm going to take you on a quick tour of some of the example programs that we've selected that you should be aware of. So I am just going to return to my slideshow to do that, just because I think the bullet points on the slides are easier to follow than the sort of smaller text on the platform. But those slides will link to each program entry on the platform, so you can consult them later on. I'll also add that for these example programs, for anyone who attended the ArtVolt webinar that I gave last week, there may be a little bit of overlap for those at the beginning, so do just bear with me for those. So I'm going to quickly go back to my presentation and move to the first example. So the first one that you can see here is CALQ's creation program. So this is one of the programs for individual artists that we were very happy to get up on the platform in the past few months. It's for anyone whose funding needs are really straightforward and mostly concerned with support to create and produce new artistic works. If that's the case for you, then this is the program for you. It's open to all disciplines and offers up to $50,000 per project. It's open to a really wide range of projects, including the production of a work or body of work, the production of unique works or copies, the commission of works, creation residencies, adaptation of a work for new media, script writing, the production of film and video works, so that can include pre-production, shooting, and editing, as well as the translation of works to which the author holds the rights. It also covers a similarly wide range of eligible expenses, including your own compensation, as well as payment for any of your collaborators. It can cover your research expenses at the beginning of a project. It can cover the development expenses, such as renting a studio, a workshop, or purchasing supplies and renting equipment. And it can also cover your rehearsal expenses as well. So the deadline for this program is simply 4 weeks in advance of your project's start date. So again, if you're just getting started with applying to CALQ and your funding needs are pretty straightforward, this is a very good first program to consider. So this takes us to the next program, which is CALQ's Vivacité program. Sorry, I'm just going to go back to that. And this is a similarly quite wide-ranging program for individual artists through CALQ. The main goal of this program is to support the artistic practices of culturally diverse professional artists and writers. So that basically means meeting one or more of the following criteria. You have to be a professional immigrant artist or writer and have been born outside of Quebec and Canada, and or be a member of a visible minority community. So much like the creation program, we're looking at a 4-week deadline before you can, before your start date for your project. And it's similarly open to all disciplines and offers a maximum of $50,000, a really wide range of potential projects. But it's important to note that projects should explore themes of cultural diversity to really meet the objectives of what the program is after. So next up, we have a really interesting CALQ program for individual artists with an upcoming deadline that you should be aware of. So this one is part of CALQ's Territorial Partnership Program, where they offer grants to specific regions of the province in partnership with regional cultural organizations. So this one is offered in tandem with the Conseil des Arts de Montréal and Culture Montréal. It's called Support for Emerging Artists, and it's focused on Montreal-based artists who are applying to receive their first CALQ grant. The funding amount is a little bit lower than the previous programs I mentioned, in that it's only a maximum of $15,000, so $15,000, but it's still a really good option for an emerging artists. It's open to all disciplines and supports projects such as a dramatic or theatrical writing project, or indeed the adaptation of a work for the stage. It can cover a composition project, the writing of a work of fiction, so that includes novel, poetry, or short stories. It can cover the design, production, and technical experimentation for a digital or cinematographic work. It can cover the production of a body of work in the visual arts. And it can cover artistic projects that establish a collaboration or partnership with the community, as well as your exploratory research. So if you're not 100% sure whether the project that you have in mind fits within those parameters, it certainly doesn't hurt to get in touch with a CALQ program officer to ask just to know for sure. And the deadline for this one is coming up fast. It's on January 19th. So I'd really suggest taking a look sooner rather than later to decide if you're actually interested in that. Next, I want to take a quick look at one of the residency programs we've just added to the platform. So this one is for a residency in Paris, but there are also a ton of similar programs available elsewhere that are either on the platform or will soon be included. So specifically, this one is for a residency located in the Récollet convent, which is located in the 10th arrondissement of Paris, which houses 80 furnished studio apartments. So for this one, it's directed at individual writers and artists with at least 2 years of artistic practice who are looking to engage in a 2 to 3 month residency to produce and disseminate their work. It's looking to promote collaboration with one or more artists from France, as well as to foster durable ties between artists from Quebec and France, and to promote the work and career development of Quebec artists internationally. So the program also offers financial assistance between $5,000 and $7,000. And as with most of CALQ's residency programs right now, the deadline has yet to be announced for next year. So do keep your eyes peeled. We'll have that updated on the platform as soon as it's announced. And we're really happy to finally be able to be documenting these residency programs on the platform. But I do want to note that because the specifics of these programs vary so significantly, depending on the host organization and their own sort of unique guidelines, we really do particularly encourage people to use these entries on the platform as a research tool, just to get a sense of what's out there and the basic information to then be able to evaluate the guidelines in more detail on the CALQ website just so that you know all of the specifics of a given residency. So next, I want to look at just a couple of programs for organizations, because I know that there are people in attendance who are here representing particular organizations in arts and culture. So first among those is an ongoing call for projects that is available through CALQ, called the Research, Creation, and Pre-Production program. So this is a program directed at not-for-profit organizations in the performing arts with a creation or production mandate, and working in fields such as circus arts, multidisciplinary arts, dance, music, or theater. And we're really looking at a wide range, again, of eligible projects for this one, including but not limited to activities such as the research and writing stage of a project, the development of staging or choreography, the creation of a work or creation residencies, scenography, sound and lighting design, set construction, and workshopping and rehearsals. Interestingly enough, there's no maximum amount indicated for this one, but it can always be helpful to either confer with a CALQ program officer or one of our grant advisors to see if your project costs are roughly in line with their expectations. The application for this one can be submitted at any time before the start date of the project, although because this is a call for projects and not one of CALQ's sort of standard permanent programs, it is possible that they will announce an end date to the program at some point when the funding envelope is exhausted. So of course, first come, first serve in that sense. And finally, I want to show you an example of one of the programs available from ministries outside of arts and culture that I mentioned briefly at the beginning of my presentation. So this one is available through the Ministère des Affaires Municipales et Habitation as part of their Regional and Rurality Fund. It's a specific section of this program called Support for Expertise in Local and Regional Development, and it's specifically geared towards projects in MRCs, or what are known as regional county municipalities in English, located throughout the province, but specifically outside of the metropolitan region of Montreal. So it's really a project with a particularly regional focus. It's open to a variety of different applicant roles, including for-profit companies, not-for-profit organizations, as well as individual professional artists. Eligible projects are varied, but can include things like carrying out a regional county municipality's mandate regarding planning or development. It can entail supporting local municipalities with professional expertise or with establishing shared services, whether social, cultural, touristic, environmental, technological, or related to other sectors. It can be about promoting entrepreneurship or supporting entrepreneurs and businesses. And it can be about mobilizing communities and supporting the completion of sort of significant structuring projects to improve living environments, particularly when it comes to social, cultural, economic, or environmental fields. So the deadlines and funding amounts vary according to each region. So it's important to get in touch with your specific regional contact. And of course, all of those regional contacts are specifically listed on the platform. So this is just one example of one of these programs that are sort of outside the norm when it comes to arts funding, but that we've been really looking to document on the platform and make people aware of. I think it gives you a pretty good example of the kinds of funding programs that are out there if you do know where to look, and if you're creative in how you can adapt your projects to fit within their specific eligibility criteria. And we're certainly aiming to carry out another big round of research very soon to identify new programs along these lines that we can share with the community, because really the more new sources of funding that we can bring into the English language arts community, of course, the better for everyone. So that's a brief tour of the platform and its functionality, as well as some specific programs to be aware of depending on your particular applicant profile. But at ALAN, we are well aware that applying for grants, even with this kind of tool, can be an intimidating process if you're new to it, or if you've maybe tried in the past with limited success and you're feeling a little bit discouraged. So as I alluded to earlier, we've developed some resources to try to take some of the stress out of the process of finding and applying for funding, and to hopefully teach you some of the important skills during that process that you'll be able to use throughout your career as an artist. So first of all, we know through talking to people in focus groups that it's all well and good to point people in the direction of the funding platform and encourage them to read through it and use it as a research tool. But for some people, there's still going to be that feeling of it being kind of overwhelming and confusing, depending on how many sort of search results correspond with your profile. how do you make sense of those results? Not always obvious for everyone. So one of the key resources that we offer is a free one-on-one funding consultation to help guide you through that process and answer any questions that you may have. It's a really flexible and low stress opportunity to have a call with me to discuss your situation and your funding needs, and then to try to meet you where you are in terms of your situation, your experience level, and help you get moving in the right direction. So we'll discuss, basic topics like your artistic practice, any projects you're currently looking to get funded, whether or not you have any past experience applying for grants, not necessary, but helpful context, as well as any programs that you might have identified and be interested in applying to. So based on that, I can offer you some suggestions for programs that you should look at and help you make sense of your eligibility so you can know if it's worth your time applying. Sometimes that's a super quick process. I can help an artist figure that out within something like 15 minutes. Other times it takes multiple sessions spanning a few months because for a variety of reasons, that applicant just isn't ready to get started until the timing works for them. And that's totally fine. I'm happy to work according to everyone's unique pace so that they feel comfortable moving forward. It's really as simple as sending me an email to request a consultation, and we can usually schedule something fairly quickly. Although this is admittedly a pretty busy period right now, based on the response that we had to the webinar last week with ArtVolt. So things might be a little bit slower than usual, so do bear with me. But my address is up on the screen now. Feel free to jot that down to get in touch to request a consultation. And of course, it'll be in the slides as well, so you can reach out once you receive those. So I like to consider those consultations as sort of the first part of a two-part process. The second part, for anyone who feels like they need some extra help, is actually receiving some hands-on assistance with your grant application. So we offer referrals to work with one of our team of experienced grant advisors free of charge. To work through the semantics here, both the referral and working with the advisor is completely free of charge. And generally over half the people I speak to in a consultation end up wanting to go this route. And it makes total sense. If you're new to the process or haven't had much success doing it on your own, the guidelines to apply, just knowing the guidelines to apply doesn't necessarily mean you know how to articulate your project in an application. And the same is true for people who've attended webinars and workshops on grant writing over the years. You can know what to do, to write a grant in an academic sense, but it really is a totally different proposition to have somebody there working with you on an application. And of course, you're not talking about something in the abstract, you're concretely working on your own application. So in terms of how this works, our advisors don't actually write the application for you, but they do work closely with you in the writing process through in-depth feedback to help you express your ideas more clearly and to do so in a way that aligns with what funders look for in a successful grant application. And again, we try to meet you where you're at in the process. If you're a first-time applicant, they can work with you from the start of the application, whereas for some more experienced artists or people working with arts organizations, they come to us further along in the process with something already written, but really looking to get a second pair of eyes on their work, often because they don't have experience applying to a provincial funder like CALQ in particular, and they want to make sure that their application is sort of well adapted to what CALQ is looking for. And this process can take place over a series of sort of roughly hour-long sessions over Zoom, where you can come to the session having worked on your grant in the interim, maybe focusing on some really specific areas that the advisor told you to look at in the previous session. And then you can show up ready to review your work together and kind of keep refining your application. And the overarching goal here is not just to help you write a stronger application right now, but to actually teach you the key grant writing skills in the process so that you're able to feel more confident and independent in your abilities in the future. So if you are interested in working with one of our grant advisors, it's a matter of either having a full-on consultation with me to help you identify the program you'll be applying to, and just help you get started figuring out the eligibility there. Or if you've already made up your mind, it's just a matter of telling me about your project and the program that you've identified, just to work through any eligibility concerns, make sure you're fully eligible before I do refer you to our advisor. And because we have a provincial focus for Quebec Relations, we are unfortunately limited to only offering this service free of charge for Quebec-based grants like CALQ, SODEC, and the Ministry of Culture, for example. The other thing to note is that the service is, of course, subject to the availability of our grant advisors. We have recently expanded our team to be able to better keep up with demand, but I do suggest you try to request assistance well enough in advance if you are working on a time-sensitive application, just to make sure that you have enough time to meet with the advisor and put the necessary amount of time into your application. I do also want to note that for anybody doing artistic work in the classroom, we're now offering targeted one-on-one support to help you navigate the Ministry of Education's Culture in the Schools program. So this is distinct from, but complementary to ALAN's own Art Ed initiative and the work that they've been doing with their Artists Inspire program, for any of you who may already be familiar with that. So beyond general assistance in accessing the program's financial support, our service can include a general introduction to culture in the schools and how it can apply to your work, as well as general sort of career counseling advice for artists looking to work in Quebec schools. So understanding the system, developing your networks, accessing complementary funding, and more. So with that said, that brings us to the end of what is admittedly a pretty lengthy presentation. I know we covered a lot of stuff today. We've had a fairly in-depth look at the platform, as well as the complementary services we offer.